We have endured another annoyingly vague interview from Prince Harry, where he's not really giving any specifics, and he doesn't explain any of this evidence that he says needs to be brought forth so that people can see what's going on. He doesn't offer any specifics once again. Nothing. That's frustrating. As a viewer, leave with zero information except that he plans on continuing this battle for forever. It's incredibly aggravating. But that's what all Harry's interviews are like, right? Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Harry was one of several people interviewed for ITV's Tabloids on Trial special, which aired recently. Big mistake. Harry says that this crusade against the tabloid press played a central role in the rift between he and his family. And that is what has dominated the headlines since this happened, because it makes zero sense for lots of reasons. Firstly, because everybody knows, it's plain to see that Harry and Meghan have caused the rift by running their mouths nonstop, complaining about their family. How is that not gonna make a rift happen? But it also makes zero sense because Prince William already did take legal action for he and Catherine's phone being hacked exponentially more times than Harry's. And they took a settlement like 4 years ago. They can't go back in for more legal action alongside Harry. That's not how that works. If you take a settlement, then you're done. You agree to not pursue any further legal action. I mean, usually there's a clause in there some of the time that says unless something new comes to light. But so what the heck is Harry talking about here? If he meant do it together in the first place, well, the reason why they're not doing it together as a family, like Harry thought would be nice, is because Harry was the one who didn't want to go along with the royal family's approach. The royal family wanted to avoid a trial and take a settlement. And that was something Queen Elizabeth, now King Charles, at the time Prince Charles, and Prince William, and Princess Catherine probably, all agreed on at that time in 2020 or leading up to 2020 when this settlement was made. All the royal family agreed, we would rather not go to trial for this. We would rather just take the settlement. And Harry was the only one who said, I don't want to take a settlement. I want to go to trial. So they said, cool, well, you can do that, but we all agree and we're going to go with the settlement route. It's smarter, it's faster, it's easier, it makes more sense, it maintains greater levels of privacy for the members of the royal family who had their phones hacked. So Harry is the only one who wants to pursue it in this manner and go to trial. So he was left to do that if he wanted. So how is this the royal family's problem? Once again, big surprise, Harry is unwilling to accept responsibility for his own choices and his own actions. And he conveniently leaves these details out of the interview, which reads as manipulative, but I don't think that he's necessarily thinking that far or hard about it. I don't know that he understands that that comes across as manipulative. I think he just runs his mouth or something. I don't understand at this point how he can continue to do these types of things. And then he gets this backlash and then he's like, why are people annoyed with this? They are just the press. It's the press. Which leads me to the next point. He also went a bit ham over this whole thing. He said he was slaying dragons, which is giving tween vibes, really. And in this interview, he says that it's monumental. And he's like, you can tell he's feeling pretty slick and smug about this. He's saying it's super monumental, super big deal. But okay, perspective here. Is it monumental? No, not so fast, Harold. Prince William got a very large sum. Some estimates have said it's in the millions of pounds, but the exact amount has not been disclosed at this time. While Harry got £140,000, not necessarily monumental in the amount or in precedence, as William and others had already won their cases and taken big settlements long before Harold's claim came in years later. Not to mention the fact that Catherine's phone was hacked like 140 some times. Harry's phone was hacked nine times, and he got 140,000. She and Prince William probably did get well into the millions, 7, 8 figures. Regardless, Harold saying that his desire to pursue legal action against the press playing any role in his rift with his family is not just overreaching, it is absolutely absurd. After everything that Harry has done and said and allowed his wife Meghan to do and say, accusing his family of so many things over the years, most of which has either been found as complete and utter lies or drastic exaggerations. In some cases, he himself has later walked back and said, no, that's not what I said or not what I meant. So to be clear, the rift is due to the Sussexes exclusively. But Harry also has contradicted himself. Once again, so surprising, I know. Harry's saying that his pursuing legal action is a central piece to the rift is immediately contradicted by himself on 2 occasions. Firstly, he says Queen Elizabeth would be in full support of him doing this, wanting him to see it through to the end. I don't believe that for a second. She was one of the people who wanted to prevent royals from participating in the trials, because that would be more invasive to their privacy, ultimately, and having more stuff like this play out in the public eye is just not how Queen Elizabeth ran things. She was in support of settlements, like William's. Specifically, she was in support of the settlement for William. So what is Harry talking about? Second time he contradicted it was when the interviewer brought up King Charles and Princess Catherine. She says that with their health in mind, have you had the thought that maybe these legal battles aren't worth it? And he seems a little bit ill-prepared to answer this one. He kind of mumbles a little bit on this answer. And then he ultimately lands on that they're completely separate. So no, my legal battles and their health are completely separate. They have nothing to do with one another, is what Harry says, which is contradictory. That's the opposite of contributing to the rift. If his legal action was completely separate from his family members and their well-being, how could it be a central piece to the rift? Which is it, Harry? Either the legal action has contributed to the rift and thus has put a strain on your relationship with now ill family members, or it's so separate from your family and has no impact on this rift and no impact on anything, then why would you say that it has something to do with the rift? It makes no sense. He can't have both things true at the same time in this scenario.
I think paranoia it's a very interesting word, because yes, then it could be paranoia, but then when you're vindicated, it proves that you weren't being paranoid. You know, same with my mother. You know, there is evidence to suggest that she was being hacked in the mid-90s, probably one of the first people to be hacked. And yet, still today, the press, the tabloid press, very much enjoy painting her as being paranoid. But she wasn't paranoid.
The interviewer discusses the paranoia that many of the people who were victims of phone hacking feel they have experienced since. And it does make sense that if you're a famous person or a public figure and your phones are being hacked, that you would feel a degree of fear or worry or general anxiety about things in general, but especially about communicating with people. You would feel a great deal of distrust. But that's very different from paranoia. Paranoia is when there is little to no evidence to back up your fears or worries of potential harm or threat. Harry says that once vindicated, it shows that you weren't being paranoid, and segues that into discussing Diana. Once again, he can't not mention her in anything he does ever. He says that the press loves to paint her as paranoid, but that she wasn't, because there's evidence to suggest that she was hacked. Okay, let's unpack that. Firstly, when she was alive, there were no rumblings, as far as I know, of phone hacking at the time that she knew about where she was like a victim of it. So therefore, it would have been paranoia for her in the context that she was not aware that she was having her phones hacked at the time. If she was, please correct me in the comments. Plus, 2 things can be happening at the same time. There can be privacy invasion happening, which is causing a degree of fear and worry and anxiety. And someone can also be generally paranoid at the same time and have irrational fears about things that there is little to no evidence to support that might actually happen. But many people have said that she was paranoid at times. And remember, a key element to paranoia, actual paranoia, is that it's irrational. While in the case of Harry, he does have a very irrational paranoia around he and the Meg's safety and privacy. particularly in the UK, which they've made their sort of scapegoat, which is something pretty standard amongst toxic type people. Interestingly, people high in narcissism usually do have a scapegoat who they constantly complain about and target and say is the problem. They kind of need someone or something to constantly be fighting against or complaining about. It's like the glue holding toxic people together. And when they no longer have a common enemy to gang up on or whatever, then they have nothing left to talk about together. Harry is irrationally fearful of being in the UK and bringing his family to the UK. He just is. His worries are very irrational, and that was on display in this interview. He also has unreasonably exaggerated concepts of his own hacking situation and the risk of it occurring again. Like I said, Catherine was hacked around 150 times, Harry only 9. And he won 15 out of the 33 complaints against NGN. So he won less than 50% of his claims. How is that monumental? And with his phone hacking being so minimal compared to others, how does that translate to being a reasonable fear? It's just not really that reasonable, especially when you take into account that this, at this point, is like over a decade old. The times in which these things happened. This is old news, technically. So not only does this show us that it's not exactly a monumental win for him, but it also shows us that his concern about this, privacy and safety and whatnot, is exaggerated. It's not in proportion to the actual threat or the actual offense that occurred, and thus it would still lean more into paranoia. And that's the point. Harry is quite paranoid about lots of things. His family, palace staff, his own staff, his privacy, his safety, the UK, the press in general, and about the press specifically when it comes to illegal information gathering and intrusion, regardless of his legal battles. So he's not necessarily vindicated like across the board here, where now he can be like, every single fear, worry, or concern is now valid. No. That's not how this works. And he or anyone can be aware of the phone hacking and have anxiety about their privacy being invaded again, while also being paranoid in general about other things that are not reasonable or rational. So Harry is kind of once again giving faulty mental health advice and setting a bad example, acting like he's so vindicated that all his fears now are valid. But Harry is clear about one thing. His goal is to take some of these cases to trial.
Family results in a torrent of abuse from the press. I've made it very clear that this is something that needs to be done. It would be nice if we did it as a family. I believe that, again, from a service standpoint and when you're in a public role, that these are the things that we should be doing for the greater good. But, I'm doing this for my reasons.
He is quite elusive or just not specific throughout the interview. And the question left unanswered that is the most intriguing is, why is he doing this? The interviewer asks, is this payback? Does this have to do with Diana? And on different occasions and different ways, she's trying to get at, why are you doing this, Harry? And he sort of beats around the questions a lot, but then eventually says, I'm doing this for reasons that are my own. Piecing together other times where Harry was seen lashing out at the press or issuing statements that were rather moody, all of which really began when he met Meghan Markle, it's clear that a huge reason why he's continuing to pursue this is that he believes it will help he and Meghan's reputations and popularity. Because the press revealed many negative behaviors of Meghan's, and because the press was critical of their decisions at various times, the Sussex strategy is attack the press so the public will come to believe that the Sussexes were unfairly targeted by the press. And this will undermine the stories that are negative or that revealed negative things about Meghan and Harry. The idea of the strategy is by demonizing the press and framing themselves as victims of the media, that people will sympathize with them and be less inclined to believe factual reports about Meghan's bullying behavior or Harry and Meghan's questionable choices or any plethora of negative criticisms leveled at the couple. The problem with this strategy, though, is that everything he's dealing with in court cases is very old at this point. There's nothing new. There's nothing dealing with Meghan Markle in any of these cases of Harry's. She was never hacked, hounded, or pursued by the paparazzi. I think one element that the media and the public are rather perplexed about is when Meghan and Harry became an item, the press was actually overly cautious. They were running a lot of positive stories and giving a lot of space to the couple, physically and metaphorically in the press. Because times had changed, people were very aware after Diana's passing, but also after Catherine's time dealing with the press, being a little bit more aggressive and abundant paparazzi and press interest in her. People generally, and the culture around journalism and paparazzi, shifted about the importance of privacy and just general decency. Not saying that they were perfect, absolutely not, but it was quite interesting to watch it play out. The really, really rare times that Meghan was photographed in a sort of paparazzi style shot, it was a single lone photographer who had been tipped off by Meghan Markle herself. So the fact that she didn't garner the same level of press interest that Diana or Catherine had was refreshing at the time. It showed a shift in tone in the media, but also that people were simply not that interested in Harry and Meghan in terms of this thirst to see them and know more about them, the way that people had with Diana especially, and still some of that was present with Catherine. Now, instead of acknowledging this as an improvement, Harry and Meghan both seem to have been offended that there wasn't the same level of interest in her as there was in Catherine, for example, which was made all the more bizarre by the fact that they were keen to sue the media at any chance they get and issue aggressive statements against the media. It seems like they don't know what they want, except that they only want positive coverage. Harry and Meghan both seem hypersensitive to criticism, and when the media reports on something and there's a bit of a critical spin on it, or it is something worth criticizing and there's valid criticism, Harry and Meghan are so thin-skinned about it they throw tantrums and act like the press is doing something wrong when they're not. He also tries to shift yet another narrative here. He says, look what's happened in the last 4 years, in which he's implying that his lawsuits have directly caused less favorable press for he and for Meghan. He's saying that more negative stories are published about Meghan and himself because he's suing media organizations? That's false. Negative stories, or critical stories rather, have been published about the couple because they've been doing terrible things. They've been lying. They've been collecting awards they don't deserve. They've not been keeping true to the promises that they made. They've been rude. They've been saying mean things and attacking their family for years, airing dirty laundry, giving away private personal details about their family members. That's why there's been negative press about them. It has nothing to do with his lawsuits. That's insane. And this point is further driven home by the fact that Harry has no examples of bias, no actual concrete evidence to back him up by saying, these are examples of articles that are basically retaliation for my lawsuits. Because that's not the case. He just implies that this is. So he's trying to shift the narrative, the public opinion of what is happening. It's a way to push responsibility off once again. That these negative stories are not because he and Meghan are unlikable and have made mistakes and have created an image for themselves that is unappealing, and that they do and say really out of touch absurd things. No, that's not why there's negative articles written about them. It's retaliation for his lawsuits. What? No, stop. That's plainly not the case. He also insists that it's still dangerous and that one person reading an article and choosing to act on what they've read could be disastrous. The problem with that statement is that there are not articles written with fantastical rubbish about Meghan and Harry. There's articles written about their shenanigans, and the people reading these articles see how manipulative and vindictive and out of touch Harry and Meghan are. People read the facts and the news, and they draw logical conclusions that the Sussexes are self-absorbed and unlikable. And so if perhaps he's actually concerned that somebody might be mad enough to come for him or Meghan, then maybe he should try not taking advantage of people, not screwing up constantly, not attacking his family constantly, and not taking advantage of organizations everywhere they go. Shocker. Then if people see that you're actually a good person, nobody's going to try to come for you. People aren't going to be mad about you or mad at you. Nobody even really cares about Harry and Meghan anyway. Or better yet, they could just stop engaging with the media altogether. This was part of what the problem with the Nigeria trip was. Harry and Meghan courted press attention on a trip that was poorly thought out, poorly executed, not vetted well enough, and it ended up disastrous. They should have chosen to not court press attention. They should have chosen to not make it a public deal and let it stay private. And then people wouldn't be able to criticize all the stupid mistakes they made. The royals have perfectly demonstrated how to actually maintain your privacy. Harry and Meghan just refuse to do it, and then they want to control the press and public's opinion of them. They want exclusively positive coverage. That's what this whole thing comes down to. They've both got histories of bullying, and this is a perfect example of it. Harry is sort of bullying the press in a bid to discourage negative stories, as well as critical opinion pieces. It's absurd. And yet another huge step sideways away from his own responsibility, he also claims that anything he says about his family results in a torrent of abuse from the press.
Family results in a torrent of abuse from the press,
which is a gross mischaracterization of what has been happening. Harry and Meghan have lied repeatedly about the family. They've given personal, private details about the family to the public via books, podcasts, interviews, and shows. Details about his family members' bodies, homes, private conversations during times of grief, immediately following funerals and deaths of loved ones. They've continually violated the privacy of his family and attacked them publicly. And that is why there has been a torrent of critical coverage following the comments that he makes about his family, because they shouldn't be allowed. It's not okay, Harry. Hello, is Harry incapable of putting two and two together? He makes these foolish and unacceptable, invasive and disrespectful comments about his family members, and then the press coverage is critical of it because everybody's like, dude, you shouldn't be doing that. That's crazy. It's basic cause and effect. It's you, Harry. You and the Meg are the problem. Harry also has a rather exaggerated idea of his mission's importance. He tries to put it in the context of public service, that this is important for the greater good, and that the public in general will benefit from Harry pursuing the lawsuits. He says that he's trying to get justice for everybody, which is wildly inaccurate. If he were to settle and win, which he did settle this particular case, the money goes to him, not to anyone else. It's just another example of Harry's overinflated sense of self-importance and generally overinflated sense of self. And that signals, once again, how out of touch he is with reality. How would this benefit the greater good of the public? How? The public are not the target of phone hacking. Only famous, rich, wealthy, powerful people are. The public are not benefiting from Harry's payouts either. He hardly donates to anything. He charges charities for his presence. So how is the public going to benefit from this, Harry? They're not really. Granted, the press organizations should not be hacking phones or emails or gaining information unlawfully, obviously. But it's hardly a greater good mission. And that couldn't be put into a more stark focus than when you look at Prince William's ITV interview about homewards and his efforts to end homelessness, who has already made massive strides and dedicated a great deal of his own resources, money, and time, of course, to create actual change by building housing that's affordable and designed to help end homelessness, which does clearly benefit the greater good, obviously. The public will be benefiting from Prince William's efforts, and once again, it seems like Harry is missing the understanding that his crusade against the press is very much more self-centered. And by all means, he can take legal action to benefit himself, but he shouldn't be trying to pretend like it's a public service thing. It's not. What William is doing is public service. A lot of times people look at the wealthy and the powerful and say, why don't they just feed everybody, end hunger, build houses, end homelessness? Well, William's actually trying to do pretty much just that. What Harry's doing is only helping himself and Meghan. But what do you think? Please do leave it in the comments. I cannot wait to read the discussion there. Thank you so much for joining today's update video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it at least somewhat fun and interesting to watch. You made it to the end. Thank you for staying till the end. Question of the day, or this one's more in the feedback category. I notice you're very careful in your approach to dissecting the family dynamics and not attacking anybody or name calling. Yes, I feel like there is enough stuff that Harry and Meghan do that's like real, actual stuff that they do and say that's absurd and worth criticizing or discussing. that you don't really need to attack them in any other way. They're shooting themselves in the foot often enough. They're creating their own mess every single day, it would seem. So there's no need to go out of bounds, but that's not a polite thing to do anyway. I feel like sometimes it can undermine the criticism when, like, say, a newspaper article, we'll just go with that, a writer. We'll just use this as a completely hypothetical example. If a writer lays out what somebody has done and why it's upsetting to people or why it's off-putting and why it's problematic and all of the evidence and whatnot, but keep it very much in its lane, then you can't really argue that. But if they start calling people names and stuff like that, or talking about irrelevant things that are just kind of not nice to criticize, or just generally less socially acceptable to discuss and criticize, then people can discredit that. Even if there's the same good, valid points in it as the first article, once you start dabbling in more snarky stuff, then it's hard to be like, that's justified. Ultimately, it just takes away from the argument that somebody's trying to make when they do that. So yes, I do try to avoid doing those things because it would just undermine the argument. But what do you think? If you have a question you'd like to be featured in Question of the Day, just leave it in the comment section below. Thank you so much again. I do so appreciate each and every one of you. And those of you who stay to the end and have seen the Question of the Day recently, let me know if you like it or not. I'll keep doing it if you do. If you don't, I will stop. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe if you have not yet already. It helps me out so very much, and it'll make sure that you do not miss out on any upcoming videos. Thanks so much again, everybody. I will see you next time. Have a happy day. Bye.